Dr. Sage here, back to continue our lecture on the seedless plants. Last time we talked about the bryophytes, which are the non-vascular seedless plants. Today we're going to discuss the vascular seedless plants. Then in the next chapter we'll talk about the vascular seed plants. We're not going to talk about them today. So the non-vascular seedless plants, the bryophytes, may have been successful at the transition from an aquatic habitat to land, but they're still dependent upon water for reproduction and absorbing moisture and nutrients through the gametophyte surface. The lack of true roots and reinforcing conducting cells limit bryophytes to very small sizes. On the other hand, vascular plants can achieve enormous heights, thus competing successfully for sunlight. However, reproduction still depends on water during fertilization, thus ferns and their relatives are more abundant in damp environments. In seedless vascular plants, the Diploid Sporophyte is the dominant phase of the life cycle. Okay, so this is unlike the bryophytes, where the gametophyte, which is a haploid, is the dominant. Okay, now the Diploid Sporophyte is the dominant. So the sporophyte is dominant, larger than the gametophyte. It produces haploid spores that will grow into a haploid gametophyte. The gametophyte has an archegonia that produces the haploid egg, and an antheridia that produces haploid sperm. Flagellated sperm will swim to the egg, and then fertilization will result in the diploid sporophyte. So vascular plants have vascular tissues, xylem and phloem. Xylem tissue is lignified for mechanical strength and impermeable to water, as well as support. With strengthened xylem, plants can achieve impressive heights, resulting in successfully competing for sunlight and dispersing their spores or seeds further away. The phloem transports sugars, proteins, and other solutes throughout the plant. So the vascular plants can have roots. So with the non-vascular seedless plants, the bryophytes, they don't have roots. Instead, they have thin rhizoids that attach to substrate, but they do not provide a strong anchor for the plant. So they can't help them to stand tall, and they're also not effective for absorption. True roots appeared later in evolution than vascular tissue. With the prominent vascular tissue system, roots can absorb water and minerals from soil and transfer throughout the plant. The extensive network of roots allows them to reach water sources and stabilize the trees. The majority of roots establish a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhizae fungi, which benefit absorption of minerals, especially phosphorus. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria are also found in roots of legume plants. The appearance of true leaves can improve photosynthesis efficiency and marks the third innovation in the seedless vascular plants, accompanying the prominence of the sporophyte generation and vascular tissues. The first type of leaf, called a microphyll, is small and has a simple vascular system with a single unbranched vein run through the center of the leaf. Microphylls might have originated from flattened lateral branches or from sporangia that lost their reproductive capability. Megaphylls are larger leaves with a pattern of branching veins. Sporophylls are leaves that have been modified structurally to bear sporangia. Strobili are cone-like structures that contain sporangia, for example in pine cones. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the different types of vascular seedless plants. Two categories, the Lycophytes and the Petrophytes. The Lycophytes, these are the earliest group of seedless vascular plants. This phylum consists of 1,200 species, made up of the club mosses, the spike mosses, and the quill warts. Now note, even though their name says mosses, these are not true mosses. Actual mosses are the bryophytes. Mosses are the non-vascular seedless plants. These that are not true mosses are vascular seedless plants. Today's club mosses are small, evergreen plants consisting of a stem, which may be branched, and microphylls. The sporophyte is the major state of the life cycle. The gametophyte is independent from the sporophyte and can be associated with mycorrhizae. First type of lycophyte is the club mosses. This is an example of club mosses. And these club mosses, the sporangia, remember those are the structures that produce the spores, arranged in clusters called strobili. Next category is the quill warts. So here's an example of a quill wart. There are currently 192 different species of quill warts. The last category of the Lycophytes is the spike mosses. This is an example of spike mosses. This family is distinguished from the club mosses by having scale leaves and by having spores of two types. Then we have the Petrophytes. Okay, and the first type of Petrophyte is the Whisk Ferns. It has conspicuous green stems with knob-shaped sporangia. They lack both roots and leaves, probably lost by reduction. DNA analysis suggests that they are more closely related to ferns. Then we have the horsetails. There's a single genus of these, and they thrive in marsh-like environments. The thin leaves originating at the joints are noticeable on the horsetail plant. Horsetails were once used as scrubbing brushes because the silica and epidermal cells were nicknamed scouring brushes. Then we have the ferns. The ferns are most readily recognizable seedless vascular plants. They're considered the most advanced seedless vascular plants and display characteristics commonly observed in seed plants. There are more than 20,000 species that live in environments ranging from the tropics to temperate forests. Although some ferns live in dry environments, most ferns are restricted to moist, shaded places. Sporophyte is the dominant life stage, which consists of large compound leaves called fronds. So here's an example of the fern life cycle. Okay, in fern, remember that the sporophyte, which is the diploid generation, is the dominant generation. When you see ferns, when you think about ferns, what you're seeing is the sporophyte generation. The gametophyte generation is very small, usually hidden like by the soil, and then the sporophyte will grow out of that and become the large fern plant you're used to thinking about. We have the diploid zygote that does mitosis to produce the sporophyte generation of the fern. On the bottom of the fern leaves, you can find the sporangia, which are the structures that produce the spores. Remember, the spores are produced through the process of meiosis to make the haploid spores. The spore then germinates through the process of mitosis into the gametophyte. Okay, and then the gametophyte has archegonium that has haploid eggs and antheridium that has a haploid sperm. The sperm swim to the eggs, fertilize the eggs, and then make again the next generation, the diploid zygote. So recall that the gametes, the egg and the sperm, are produced by mitosis because you're going from haploid to haploid, whereas the spores are produced by meiosis because you're going from diploid to haploid. So, soria appears small bumps on the underside of the fern fronds, okay, and this contains the sporangia, which produces the spores. And it releases those spores to make the next generation, which is the gametophyte generation. All right, so for the seedless plants, mosses are the base of the food chain. Bryophytes make the soil more amenable to colonization by other plants. Ferns contribute to the environment by promoting the weathering of rock, accelerating the formation of topsoil, and slowing down erosion. The water ferns harbor nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria and restore this important nutrient to aquatic habitats. Dried peat moss is commonly used as fuel as a renewable resource. And then flourish use blocks of spongium to maintain moisture in floral arrangements. So these are ways that seedless plants are important to both humans and our environment. Okay, this series of 3 video lectures talks about the seedless plants. In the next set of video lectures, we're going to cover chapter 26, in which we discuss the seed plants. Until then, this has been Dr. Sage.